If this goes on, don't panic. Bringing hope to the world through speculative fiction.
Hello and welcome to If This Goes On, Don't Panic. Today we have writer and neuroscientist Arula Ratnakar. Diane, how are things going?
I just got back from a vacation.
Yes.
Which I desperately needed.
Yes.
And I have hit the ground running. I find that there were a lot of people who wanted to tell me things or do things with me while I was on vacation, and they all decided to do it this week. So a little overwhelmed, but the vacation was really awesome. I did a driving trip across Canada, and I've been sharing kind of the slideshow of it, as it were, on my stream over the past couple of weeks. And that should tell you what was in it, because it's taken a couple of weeks worth of, daily streams to go over everything. Currently, I'm doing a tour of the Canadian War Museum, which is, that was a very educational experience, especially for someone like me who likes to write military science fiction. So
excellent.
Really useful. What's going on in your world?
Nothing nearly as fun as that. I do think I went on a vacation since the last time we recorded, because it's been a little while, right?
Sometime, few months, yeah.
Yeah. So we went to Baltimore. That was cool and interesting.
Nice.
I saw Edgar Allan Poe's grave. Took some pictures of that.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was neat. It's like the Mecca, Edgar Allan Poe.
Absolutely.
The Raven was one of the first things that really got me interested in literature. So
me too.
Totally obsessed with that poem for 8th grade through 9th grade or something. I can't remember when I read it, but it was somewhere around there.
That's about when they introduce it to us here in Canada too. Yeah,
somewhere around there.
Cool.
Yeah. So we got Hugo longlisted also since the last time we recorded.
Thank you guys for your support. That is awesome. I really appreciate that.
Yep. Very excited about that. That's our second time, so we're excited about that. Hopefully next time it's a short list. I don't need to win. I would be okay with that.
Right? Just the acknowledgement is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, thanks. That's our listeners, right? Because you guys, and your support is what does that. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for having her back,
Yeah, absolutely. That's so awesome. And it was funny because I didn't even realize it. I just, I was actually typing a little note to our Patreon folks, and I just happened to be, these stats are out, and I look at them every year just to look, and I was like, oh my God, we're on the long list. I had no clue. Okay. So that was a nice little surprise.
Sweet.
Yeah. Aside from that, just normal stuff. I will say I am getting a little more help with the website. I think I'm currently vetting a co-op actually to help out with the website a little bit.
Cool.
So this is something we've been talking about for 2 years, maybe at this point.
Yes. I've been supposed to be doing it, but yeah, I have not had the time, right? That's just the honest truth. Yeah.
Same, just overloaded with stuff. So I've got a co-op that I'm vetting for that. So hopefully that works out.
Sweet.
And the only other thing I'd really say is that currently I am writing a literature hosting company. I'm going to ask them how they intend to protect our free speech now that Trump is, doing nasty things to people. So,
it's worse than that. Political stuff going on here in Canada too. I just found out that there was an Irish band. I don't even know who they are. Irish hip hop. They rap in Gaelic. Huh. I'm given to understand. What were they called? Kneecap or something? Now, granted, I heard all this secondhand and I don't listen to the music, so I don't know what their lyrics are like. But apparently they were banned from touring in Canada because of, their hateful anti-Semitic speech. And apparently what that amounts to is the fact that people chant Free Palestine at their concerts. And if that's the case, expect to hear from me, Canadian government, because I'm not having it. I'm going to be a problem.
Right?
I don't know. I don't want to get into that.
I'm pretty sure I heard about that hip hop group, by the way, and I'm pretty sure I've listened to some of their songs before, but I can't remember their name either right now. So
if they genuinely are anti-Semitic, like genuinely anti-Semitic, of course I support this banning, right? I want nothing to do with it. We've had this discussion about the limits of free speech, you and I, in the past, right? And that, my belief is that speech that is inherently a threat to someone that's assault, and that's where it stops, right? So if it is genuinely anti-Semitic, then I don't want it here.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And good. Thank you. Right. But if it isn't, if it is what I've heard, and it's just that people are protesting what's going on in Palestine, I'm going to be an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. No, I 100% agree with you. I'm thinking that it's probably just conservative nonsense, but yep. I don't know for sure. Like I said, I can't remember.
It could be conservative nonsense. That is entirely possible. I do not know enough about the situation. And hey, as we're probably going to discuss at some point today, it's very hard to know what is actually real anymore in some cases, with the way trolls, bots, social media, propaganda, AI, right?
Oh, I have so many questions about reality and so forth. So maybe we should just get to our guests, because I am ready to talk about that.
I think we should.
All right.
I think we should.
Fantastic. Okay. Arula Ratnakar coming up next. Okay, and we are back. I have the shortest bio that I've ever read on this podcast in front of me right now. Arula Ratnakar is a computational neuroscience PhD student at Boston University and a science fiction author, but that ignores so many things. Welcome, Arula. I can't wait to talk to you about all of those things.
Oh, hi. Yeah, you asked for a short bio, so that's what I came up with. It was a short bio.
Definitely the shortest I've ever had.
Wow, yeah. Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we'll just allow you to organically introduce yourself as the podcast goes on. So unless folks out there are big readers of Clarkesworld, they may not know you so well. So I kind of want to start at the beginning with you. Can you just tell us what got you interested in the science fiction in the first place?
Oh, yeah. So I've kind of had a pretty wild path to what I'm doing now, in general. So I was originally an architecture student, and then I wanted to use my degree to go into film set design. And so I worked as a set decorator and stuff like that. And there was this one project that I was doing where it was a set for a sci-fi thing where I had to design a neuroscience lab. So I was oh, okay, but what if I go into method sections of neuroscience research papers to figure out what they do? And then from that, I was just wow, neuroscience is really interesting. And then I had this kind of really huge philosophical realization that there's nothing else really that is going to care about understanding the human brain other than humans. So this is what I want to spend my life doing. So then I just kind of jumped into that, and I totally restructured my life, and I learned a bunch of biology and neuroscience and math. And then I did a post-bac program after graduating. And then I got into and now I'm doing a theoretical neuroscience PhD. My interest in science fiction, designing things for science fiction or coming up with science fiction stories, was at the same point as that philosophical realization. So
wow.
I just started writing stories, and that's when they started getting published too, is when I was this is what I really, really care about. So I'm going to write stories about this. So I've been writing science fiction since that.
Cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty intense. And you must have been kind of pretty young when that happened, because you've been publishing since you were probably your early 20s or late teens, right?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, yeah, I think that realization I had was in 2018, early 2019. And then, yeah, my first Clarkesworld story was in 2019. So yeah, it was the same time.
Yeah. And your first story published was in Clarkesworld, is that correct?
Yeah.
when you published your first story in Clarkesworld, did you realize at the time, like, this is like a big deal here? This is a, like so many people try to get published here and can't.
I mean, I'd read the magazine when I was like growing up, but I didn't realize it. I mean, now obviously I know how prestigious and amazing it is, but I didn't fully realize at the time how
Yeah.
big of a deal it was. But yeah.
Before we had started recording, I was telling Arula a story about how I'd actually heard of her because you went to school at Carnegie Mellon, which is in Pittsburgh, which is where I live. Most listeners probably know that at this point. And my friend said to me, "Oh, hey, this like 19-year-old, I might have the age wrong. This 19-year-old got published in Clarkesworld, and she lives in Pittsburgh." And I was like, "What? We have to meet this person at some point." So we like looked at your story, and we like looked you up on the internet, and like I tracked you down on Twitter at the time. You know what I mean? I started
Yeah.
following you, and I think that's kind of when we started conversing, probably at least to some degree.
Yeah.
You were like at least Pittsburgh famous. You probably didn't even know it.
Yeah, I had no idea. I was just, yeah. That's funny.
What was it like for you to like, realize that, oh, I just published my first story in Clarkesworld and realize what Clarkesworld was?
It was really cool, obviously, and it was really cool to get so many like reviews and feedback and attention and things like that. I will say though, like I feel like, now I'm 26 years old, so it's been a while since my first story. It's interesting if you do get like noticed a lot for your first few stories, if you like kind of change your voice and your tone and stuff, like how people react. So that has kind of been an interesting thing, because I've definitely changed the kinds of stories I'm writing
Mhm.
since my like 20-year-old produced stuff.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure. Well, let's talk about that for a minute because, gosh, I've been reading you for all of those years now, basically. I've always been a big reader of Clarkesworld, and I've been lucky enough to meet Neil a number of times. In fact, I was hanging out with Neil the night that he won his first Hugo, which is very cool.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
cool. He deserves it. He deserves it so much. Literally,
Oh,
it's so well deserved.
totally, totally. He had been joking for a long time that, he's going to be one of those people that's just nominated like 50 times and then never wins, right? And then he's won like what, 3 or 4 years in a row, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit. How do you feel that you've changed over time? When I think of your work, because you don't publish a ton, but you always publish like something pretty lengthy, like novelette length
Yeah.
about, right? And you
Yes.
publish like one or two a year, basically, more or less.
Yeah. One a year.
One a
Yeah.
year? It's been one a year?
Yeah, I think that's been the rate. Yeah.
So then it's pretty much a year between reading your stories, and unless I was studying you, it's harder to, like map out those changes. Tell us how you feel you've changed since then and how people have reacted to that. I feel like personally that your stories have always been fairly complicated.
Yeah, no, I think the content of this, like the density and the like putting lots of like information and stuff like that in the stories has been kind of
Mhm.
consistent throughout. I think the types of characters I'm writing has changed somewhat. I think when I was like in my early stories, the characters are very like, they were all really like kind of wholesome, nice people. Generally, like,
Mm.
like that has definitely changed. I'm writing a lot
Yeah.
of more messed up or like unlikable characters now. There's a lot more, I guess, nihilism in my stories now,
Mm.
because my early stories I was like, oh, like Submergence was one that was really popular that I wrote when I was 20. And in it I was like, oh, and then the corrupt people get like they're like, like the good people win, the corrupt people go like, get punished or whatever. And it, like I think about that and I was like, yeah, I was a bit naive when I wrote that story,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I see why a lot of people liked it, for sure. But yeah.
Do you think that there's a tendency, like, because I'm feeling this, right? Is it currently like the trend to write about messed up people? Like, do you think that that's preferred in the market currently?
I don't know necessarily, because I've gotten a lot of mixed reviews on my on my characters. There's some people who are like, what, this is awful. I hate reading about these people. And then there are other people who are like, oh, it's like, wow, these are like complicated and flawed and interesting. I have no idea. I guess like some people prefer it, other people don't, like, but that's what's, I guess, coming out of my brain
fair
right
enough.
now. So
Yeah. I'm curious too. Like, what did you mean by messed up exactly, Diane?
Well, okay, as part of the research for this podcast, I read one of the stories that Arula published with Clarkesworld, right? Fractal Karma, right? And
That's a new one, right?
yeah, that's my newest one.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
yeah, the protagonist is a drug dealer, and or at least the viewpoint character is a drug dealer, right? And she's all about, and I'm going to get the money, and then I'm going to, prove that I'm not unreliable, and, but she is unreliable, right? And yeah, and I'm like, okay, well, and I find that these kind of characters tend to be like, I see more stories about them, right? I don't tend to see a lot of stories about characters who are complex, and they all have their own flaws. Maybe it's just what I've been reading, right? But like characters that have flaws, but are in, often, they don't have any big moral deficits. They're decent people, right? But they're like, they have issues, right? These people, those kind of characters don't seem to be as common these days. And I'm just wondering if that's like a trend in current science fiction, because everybody's feeling, nihilistic because of the state of the world, or what,
That is definitely a good question, because these are the characters that have started to, like, I guess, these are what I've been able to come up with recently. It's like, I think especially over the past few years, I think like I have family members in Ukraine. And so I think after like the invasion of Ukraine, I think I like, a lot of like horrible stuff happened to them. And I think that really like changed my worldview, and it really like made me feel, I don't know, I think really that was a turning point. Like if you look at my stories before 2022 and my stories after 2022, that's really been like a tipping point in just how I guess I've seen the world. And maybe it'll change in the future, and maybe like my characters that I come up with will be different and stuff. I'm not really thinking about like the trends in sci-fi or anything, but at least for me personally, like the people that I've been coming up with, and like the worldviews that I've been like putting into my stories, and like the plots and all of that, they're really kind of just a reflection of what, is cathartic for me to write. And this has been what's cathartic for me to write recently, I guess. And clearly, I guess this one really resonated. This Fractal Karma was actually like, it got nominated for an Ignite Award. So I guess it resonated with other people too, because yeah, clearly something about, people with deep like flaws and I don't know, something is resonating.
Fair enough.
This all reminds me of a panel I was on over the summer. It was one of these panels where you talk about like what you've read recently and what you think people should be reading and that sort of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And someone asked, like, what are you reading right now? And I said, I'll be honest, like, I know that everyone's sick of superheroes right now, but I've been reading a lot of comic books because the characters still have like flaws and all this kind of stuff, but also the bad guys get their ass kicked usually, which is like what I want right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. See, like I guess, for me, the characters that I'm tending to write right now are like that, right? And so I'm like, but I don't see a lot of that. And, it's just a question from one writer to another, observing the market, the trend, the stream, as it were. Right? Because I kind of want the bad guys to get their asses kicked right now too.
I know.
I'm so tired of them winning all the time, right? There's got to be a reckoning sometime, right?
I feel like I'm just like losing faith in that, I guess. This is so depressing to say. Like, I mean, like, I don't think people should look to me or my stories as like, this is like, as like, ways to act or ways for the world to be, for sure. I just write whatever is like cathartic and then I send that out. So, um,
Fair.
but I don't know. Yeah, I guess, yeah, maybe I need to regain some faith that the world will actually end up being okay. And maybe when I regain that faith, my stories will start to be more like that. I don't know.
I mean, that's fair, right? Like, I don't know. I guess that, I mean, this is our podcast is about hope punk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, hope punk isn't that, power of friendship, My Little Pony, glittering, everything works out in the end. We know it doesn't, right? Our hope is hope in the face of overwhelming odds and deep darkness, and recognizing that sometimes the good guys do not win, right? Often, and so I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, it's absolutely fine, right? I guess I'm wanting to tell stories that, okay, so I've said before, yeah, this is my ADHD brain doing its weird soup of things, but I've said before a few times on this podcast, our listeners will have heard this many times, right? This is the cyberpunk dystopia we tried to warn you about, right?
Yeah.
We're living in it. We're in it, right? Some people, when the writers were writing about these cyberpunk futures, they were generally writing them as cautionary tales. Some people took them that way. Other people took them as instruction manuals, right? I guess I'm wanting to create an instruction manual for the resistance, and that's where I'm at currently, right? It's cool if other people aren't there. We need to have these stories of, that do have that nihilistic kind of, perspective. And I'm sorry that, shit happened to your family. That's, that's the thing. Like, none of this stuff that's going on in the world is distant. It's not someone else. It's not a fairy tale. It's not a fiction. It's not a story that people are telling to, scare us or whatever. This is real shit that's going on. It happens to real people and it affects us. And that's cool. That's absolutely cool. No judgment, right? I'm just saying that I'm seeing a lot of that in currently published science fiction, and I want to see some hopeful stories too, right? So maybe, I don't know if it's just me, I don't, and I'm not judging, right? I don't really know, like, I sound like I'm positioning myself against this, but it's more like, I don't know. I want some hope, right? So
I think that's fair.
Yeah, no, I also actually, the stuff that I've been reading, it has not been that nihilistic, even though that's been what I've been writing, because that's what I've been able to produce recently. The stuff that I've been reading, like, I've really loved, like, if you've read Fiona Moore's stories, I really, really like what she does, where she kind of focuses on, like, even in post-apocalyptic settings, like, there's, like, community building and, like, people, like, really, like, she focuses on, like, things that are hopeful about humanity. And that's the stuff I've been drawn to reading, for sure. But I guess in my own writing, like, I don't know, I've also been kind of pushing the limits of what kind of characters I can create as well. So that's a part of it. Like, I went from very, like, moral paragon, really, like, good people, like, really, like, I wanted to see if I could write people who were not that, or who were, like, very different from that as well. So it's kind of, yeah. So that's another aspect to it. And also the other part of it is that I actually kind of, I empathize and I sympathize with, like, Leela, for example. Like, she's
not an evil
painfully,
person.
yeah, she's like, it's like, I like writing her because she's like an interesting, she's like, I think someone described her really like painfully real, like a painfully real human, like she's not you cringe looking at her decision making and her thought process.
Yes.
And I think there was a really like interesting intellectual challenge to be like, okay, like how do I write someone that is like you're really like in there with her thoughts and all of the cringe stuff, all of the like embarrassing thoughts, all of the like bad decisions and all of that.
Yeah.
Like it was an interesting like challenge to write that as well, I think.
Yeah, that's cool. I can definitely respect that. Like, it's hard to find a balance of a character who is so flawed, right? That you still like. I like her.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I like her as a human being. I'm like, oh, don't do that.
Yeah.
That, right?
Yeah.
You had a moment of doubt. Go with that, but she didn't. And yeah, I like that. A lot of people mean well and end up in making awful decisions because of fear.
Yeah.
Right. And she does that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's a good lesson to us too, right?
I was going to ask about how you plot your stories because, like we mentioned earlier, there's a lot going on, and sometimes things that you don't think are bound together end up being bound together. How do you plot your stories? Wait, let me stop there real quick and say also that you bring in a lot of like sometimes hard science. Sometimes math. Like I would definitely describe some of your stories as like, I don't know, math stories, sort of, and I don't want to put people off by saying that. It's kind of hard to explain because I don't really think I've ever read anything quite like that anywhere else, but you definitely use like mathematical concepts to kind of drive stories sometimes. But I am curious how you plot all of these things together.
Yeah, so I guess normally they take me about a year to construct. Like I use the full year to write each of these. The one I'm writing now, it's been like almost 2 years, so like we'll see.
Wow.
But anyway, I kind of have in the back of my mind, I have like a filter, and like all of the interesting like ideas and thoughts or like information and things like that I like learn goes into like this, I guess I call it like, I don't know, it's kind of like a stew that's going to turn into the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I have an outline. So like I have an outline it's just like bullet point beats for the story, like start to finish. Like I have like, and I revise that outline, and I always make sure to have it end in like a solid, like concrete ending that ties everything together. If I don't have that, then like I can't like even move forward. Like every single draft needs to have like a good ending, and all of the beats need to be solid. And like as I go through that year, like the outline kind of develops. I like start making like different connections. So, like I'm like, oh, like I could do this instead, and and that kind of stew of like all of my like best thoughts and stuff, that all goes into the outline. And then when I finally have something where I'm like, okay, yeah, I've been thinking about these characters and these people and their lives for like a solid year, so they've definitely developed a lot of life of their own, and a lot of like, like I can see the whole thing kind of play out like a movie in my head at that point, because it's just been running there in the back of my mind for like over and over again. And when I get to that point where I know this thing really well, that's when I write it, and I just kind of write it out, and then I submit it.
You kind of just like fill in the gaps between the bullet points.
Yeah, so like I write because I've the outline is there, but I kind of imagine the whole thing as a movie, so like I can play through the movie, and so I just write down the movie.
Oh,
Cool.
When you're thinking about the scientific / mathematical concepts, does that inform how your story is going to move forward, or does that stuff just kind of end up being in there, or like how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of the plot points and a lot of the stuff is formed around whatever mathematical concept I'm interested in studying. Like in fractal karma, like Brownian links and like topological concepts and dynamical systems theory were like things that I was really like, I'm just generally interested in. So I formed a lot of the plot around like wanting to study how some like topological construction would act as. And then like Axiom of Dreams was another one where I was like, I read this really interesting proof of like edge paths on a dodecahedron, and I was like, huh, like what if like people lived on like a dodecahedron shaped world, and like what would that be like? And so that's kind of how Axiom of Dreams like kind of it was formed around that. Yeah, so I think the math concepts, because I love math. I'm like, I think about it constantly. My research is like very theoretical. Like I love math a lot, so I love like celebrating it in these stories.
The Axiom of Dream story was, I think, one of your weirdest by far. That was so.
Yeah.
It's like, just to give like a quick summary, like, and I can't remember the whole thing, but this woman takes these drugs and then has this dream where she lives on this world that's a dodecahedron, and these people like worship this something at the center of the dodecahedron. I guess it's like a clerical order, sort of, right?
Kind of, yeah.
And you kind of, they work their way up. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So basically the premise of the story is that there's this mathematician, and she has a brain chip that would help
That's right, the brain
it
chip.
would help optimize her dreams to help her make like mathematical breakthroughs. She's not supposed to do like psychedelics while having the chip, but she does them anyway. And then when she does the psychedelics and she falls asleep, she's able to like enter the world that the brain chip has created. And it's shaped like a dodecahedron because that was her previous research was on dodecahedron. So then in that world, there's like a whole bunch of like people, and they all like their like lives are all kind of building towards helping her solve this mathematical problem she's studying on like Gödel's incompleteness. And but yeah, I don't want to spoil too much, so I think I'll leave it at that.
Oh, that's okay. I'll be honest with you. Like I enjoyed the story, but I did not completely understand all of the mathematical stuff in there. I was just like, I know that I know there's connections here. This is very clear to me that this is going because of this, but I'm not really sure what's going on with the dodecahedron thing. But again, this goes back to me just not being great at math, right?
No, but I think that's also something that I've been trying to improve in my stories too, is like how I communicate, like how I deliver mathematical, because I think a lot of people have math anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, if they like encounter one of my stories, especially like I think in Axiom of Dreams, it is a hard challenge writing hard science fiction or writing like mathematical fiction to make it like really, to communicate it in a way that doesn't like trigger anxiety in people. So that's something that it's an ongoing writing thing that I'm trying to figure out. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have some anxiety about math, right? But not a lot of it, right? And I've got to say, I'm doing fine. Like if this is a progression that you've been working on, right? In Fractal Karma, I'm cool. I understand what you're talking about. It's not freaking me out, right? At least I grasp the basics of what you're talking about enough that it makes sense to me. I can follow the plot. I understand why it's important, and at least the basics of how it works. So I think you're doing okay,
That's really good to hear, because that's something I've been trying to like work on. I think another thing about my characters were that they were all kind of like carbon copies of each other is another like thing that I would obviously my stories are good. I worked really hard to like really improve my characterization in terms of like trying to like challenge myself to improve characters. And so now that like I've kind of challenged myself there, I'm currently trying to like improve my exposition, especially on the math concepts. So it's really good to hear that like if Fractal Karma like was better than some of my previous work, that if you were able to like understand it, because I'm really trying to work on that.
It's hard to do. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
literally my job, is to explain difficult concepts to people. I am generally hired by a
Yeah.
corporation to develop a curriculum around usually something very technical, you know what I mean? And then once I figure out how it works, then I have to explain it in like common terms, you know what I mean? So that people can learn their jobs.
Yeah.
So I get it. Like, it's hard to do. And I think a lot of people don't understand that, or take it for granted, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe.
You've mentioned one of your characters taking psychedelics and then going into different worlds and stuff. One thing that I've always said about you is that you're like Phillip K. Dick if he actually knew what he was talking about.
Wow, that is high praise. Like, what? That's crazy. I mean, he's a huge influence, so that's a really high praise.
That is interesting.
I think I'm drawn to your work mostly because you discuss the nature of reality a lot, and that's what drew me to PKD. You know what I mean? I love that he would discuss these things. This is something that's always been. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I've always realized that I was neurodivergent before that was a thing, and I perceive things differently than other people, or I've lived a different life in a way that was unexplainable to me for most of my life. So I was always attracted to things like that. But your stories are very much like that too. But again, you have that scientific backing and that mathematical backing that he did not have, right? I'm very curious what led you to be so curious about the nature of reality as well. I should bridge this topic also by saying that not only, do you do neuroscientific research, but you've done work with psychedelics as well, right?
Oh, like research. Yeah, I worked in a lab that studied psychedelics for a bit before my PhD.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what what has made you want to write about the nature of reality? Why is that an interesting subject to you?
I mean, I think it goes back to my, when when I decided I wanted to go into neuroscience in the first place, it was kind of again, and that's kind of when I started writing sci-fi too. It was like I had this really huge philosophical realization that like the human mind is just this like really fascinating machine that kind of converts photons and sound waves and like somatosensory information into, our conscious experience and our perception and all of this like amazing stuff. It's kind of just wild. And like I mean, this is what I'm obsessed with. Now my research is on like prenatal, like embryonic neurodevelopment and trying to develop a theory of why that
Huh.
happens. I'm trying to like throughout, it's just been this kind of obsession of mine of like, okay, why are we here? How does our mind work? Like, I don't know. It's just this amazing thing. We're able to comprehend and interact with the universe in such a like deep and detailed way. It's just something that I can't stop thinking about
Yeah.
in like that's what I think about like constantly in general.
Is there a family history that may relate to that? Like, I find the subject fascinating too. And, I have stuff in my own family, like my mother is bipolar, who occasionally has psychotic breaks. I probably has
Mhm.
ADHD as well that was never diagnosed because I act a lot like her, right? I have ADHD and PTSD. My husband is schizophrenic, right? So I have some very personal reasons to have some interest in the perception of reality, right? And especially things that, make us question our perceptions. So it, I mean, like, I don't, I'm not trying to like bring up dirt or anything. And if you don't feel comfortable, talking about it, that's cool, right? I tend to be very open about this, but maybe other people don't, and that's fine, right? But do you have anything like that, like family history, family experience, or personal experience that makes you especially interested in that shifting sense of perception?
Yeah, I do. Like I have, family members who, have struggled with psychosis. And I think that in particular is really interesting because I think they're really like, good people and really kind people. And, I think there's a
Uh-huh.
huge stigma. Actually, I did write a story, not for Clarkesworld, but for a different for future tense fiction recently called Coda. And the protagonist was someone who is like schizophrenic and has like ongoing psychotic episodes and things like that. But she's like a brilliant, cryptographer. And so I really I think there's a lot of negative stigma around psychosis and people who struggle with psychosis. And I always found that
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
the family members that who have it and who like I've interacted with like really like closely, I always thought, this is one of like the most imaginative people I've ever met in my life. Like, and this idea of like their version of reality is so different from mine, and they and
Uh-huh.
yeah, exactly, it's like these shifting realities, and the way that I kind of think about it is like it's kind of like dream like I wrote about this in that story actually, but it's kind of like dream logic. Like when you're in a dream and you're like flying in a dream, you just know that it's true, like that's the ground truth,
Mhm.
like oh yeah, people can fly, that's just the ground truth of it, right? But it's kind of like the axioms of that world are like the ground truth of that reality is just different from the like
Uh-huh.
ground truth or like the axioms that govern like whatever reality we're in. And it's just so fascinating that the mind can create that, and the mind can like ultimately like all of the, again, the photon sound waves and everything that are like creating what we perceive as reality, if that information is processed slightly differently, then you're interacting with a different reality that your mind has created. It is just so interesting to me. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, I agree with you about, there is a certain stigma, right? But the fact is the human mind is complicated, and a lot of us just think in different ways. You being a neuroscientist know that better than me.
Yeah.
Right? But I think that, there are strengths to these different ways of thinking, and there are
Hmm.
reasons why these things still exist in the human experience and genome, right? They like you know, I'm an incredibly creative person. My mom is an incredibly creative person. My husband is an incredibly creative person. He's a genius in many areas. For instance, he never had trouble with math, right? Our world, our social structure doesn't have a lot of support systems in place for people, like it's designed for neurotypical people, right? It's designed for
Yeah,
people
it
who think
is.
in a particular way, and we don't have a lot of supports to help those who do not think in
Mhm.
that way to get on with it, right? Like we don't, and there could be, we could do better, right? We could do better.
No, yeah, we can do much better. I feel like I think, every single human brain and every single person is just like, they're truly like an invaluable like addition to the universe, because like their autobiographical timeline has never existed in the history of humanity and will never exist again. Like every single person has like a one like an invaluable perspective. Is my personal opinion. Like every single person has this like unique fingerprint of a mind, and it's like
Awesome.
I don't know, they all need to exist because they're just fascinating, like, things, like, I just I don't know, every person is literally nothing like you will ever exist again, and nothing like you has ever existed before.
At work lately, I work at a very large company, and we have a group that reaches out to neurodiverse people, you know what I mean? And so I've become part of that group, and I have been helping neurodiverse people. And it also seems like, for whatever reason, my job attracts neurodiverse people. And now I'm part of the leadership team, right? And so I recently did like a little presentation for the leadership team to be like, hey, I don't know for a fact, but it really seems like a lot of our team is neurodiverse. I'm neurodiverse. Here's like some ways that people experience things differently, right? And I went through things like, like, I don't know, like overwhelm, for example, just what's the word I want to use? Like I was one example I use is like how when I go into the office, the bright lights really get to me. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Or the people walking around all the time are super distracting, and like so I end up using half my brain worrying about that when I really need to be focusing on whatever it is I'm doing, right? And just like trying to describe the difference between how someone like myself, an ADHD person,
Mhm.
perceives things versus the rest of the leadership team who are neurotypical, or at least if they're not neurotypical, I don't know about it, and trying to explain it to them. And it's just so hard to like explain to other people, like, actually, we perceive things differently
Yeah.
because they just don't believe you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
No, I totally
Yeah.
get that. Yeah, no, I also like I was diagnosed with like autism when I was a teenager, and like
Ah.
I don't know, it's interesting because I feel like yeah, there's a lot of things that I guess people wouldn't really understand about how I think about things and why I spend so much time like in my thoughts. But yeah.
Right? I struggle with that too,
Hmm.
I could honestly just sit there. Just to give a good example, sometimes I'm a very slow reader, and the reason is because something in the story reminds me of something, which reminds me of something else, which reminds me of something else, and next thing I know, I'm been sitting there thinking for like 20 minutes instead of reading the book.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts around how to communicate to folks about different perceptions of reality?
I feel like putting the onus on like neurodiverse people to like have to tell other people how to act in response to them is a lot. But I think my
Mm,
advice, and
Hmm.
this is what I've kind of
it
done, is
is.
just like surround myself with people who are a good community and who are like accepting and are like who, don't really think about it or care about it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, yeah, I wasn't, I feel like I didn't have a preparation for some
No,
of these.
that was a totally off the cuff question and not something I had planned to ask you. So I don't expect some kind of like brilliant answer from you or anything.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, I mean, like, sometimes conversations on this podcast take unexpected turns, and we do a lot of speaking off the cuff. I don't actually, Alan and I have very different ways of dealing with this. Like, he'll do like all kinds of prep and organization and stuff, and I'm like, okay, who are we interviewing? Let me get a sense of who they are. Okay, right? I'll read your bio. If I haven't read something you've written, I'll at least look at it, and that's it. That's all I do, because for me, it's always off the cuff, right? I tend to feel more comfortable when it's off the cuff, and I tend to do better under those circumstances. So if, I don't know is a perfectly legitimate answer,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. I also don't know if I would be a good like authority on advice to give people on
right?
No. Well, I mean, the only reason that occurred to me is because you're a neurodiverse person, right? And you're
Yeah.
alive, right? And you know,
And you write about
and
different levels of consciousness in a way that explains it
yeah,
to the
yeah,
readers, so that they can follow, right?
yeah,
Yeah, which
exactly,
is
exactly,
really cool, you know?
exactly.
I I haven't. Well, no, it's interesting. Okay, so here's some writer talk, right? Writer craft talk. You are okay. If this story I've read, now I have not read all of your work, right? But if this story I've read is any indication, right? You're okay. Not that you don't communicate the feelings of the characters well, because you do, right? But that's not where it's based. It's more based in terms of how they think about things and how other people think about things, and where the juxtaposition comes in, right? And, an explanation of the concepts organically, right? So it's about the guiding us through the steps of the mechanics, right? I have, when I'm writing, my characters are all about feeling, right? Not that I don't communicate the thought process. I do, right? In particular, the book that is, on its way to coming out, right, is a lot of it is, well, there's espionage that goes on, right? So the character, military science fiction, right? So the character is very much saying one thing and thinking another, you know? So I do a lot of that, but really it's more about feeling. And I try to connect to people through the feeling process, and I think that also is something that I do in my everyday interactions, right? I'm obviously trying to do it now. I do a lot of the, neurodiverse relating through mutual experience stuff, right? Sometimes I
Yeah.
am
Yeah.
perceived as, well, it's not all about you, right? I've heard that a lot, right? Some people have said that to me a lot. And dude, I'm not talking about myself to talk about myself. I'm talking about myself because this is an experience that I think I've had that probably relates to the feeling or to the experience you've had, or an understanding, and I want to connect on that level. You're getting it because you're also neurodiverse. Sometimes people who aren't, right, don't understand that, right? And so So I found a strategy, but it sometimes works and it sometimes doesn't, is what I'm trying to say. And so I offer the related experience, related feeling strategy as something, because neurodiverse people have to get along in a neurotypical world. We have to, right? So, you're
Yeah.
right. It's a lot of burden on the neurodiverse person to have to do the communicating, but the neurotypical people generally don't have any incentive to do so. They think a certain way. The world is set up for the way they think. They think everybody else thinks that way. And unless they have somebody close to them in their life who doesn't think that way, they don't know there's anything wrong. So we're the ones who come across as weird, and we're the ones who have to make that leap. Right. And yeah, is it fair? No. Is it shitty sometimes? Damn right. Right. But there we are. That's the world we live in. Right. So I'm trying to, I try to do it in some ways. Alan tries to do it in different ways. And maybe you try to do it in different ways. And maybe we can all learn from each other. Right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
100%. I definitely feel the comment about it being on the neurodiverse person to communicate, because
yeah.
Unless you've had it caught earlier in your life, or you're in treatment or something, like it can be, life is already so overwhelming that it can be difficult for some people. Like, just looked at what time it is, and I'm like, oh my God, this interview is going so fast. And I want to ask you several other questions. I kind of want to go back to your research on psychedelics a little bit, and I have admitted this before on the podcast. In my 20s, I may have experimented, possibly, with things some people may call psychedelics. And for me, like, it was a very positive experience, to be honest. I really felt like my understanding of reality was different, and that I was a lot more open to possibilities after that. I'm curious, like, how does that affect your brain in a neuroscience way?
I will also say that I have some experience with psychedelics. I will leave it at that.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, I may or may not have some experience with psychedelics. So yes.
I mean, like, what, wait, sorry, what is the question?
I'm just curious, like, how does that change? Does it change somebody's brain? If so, like, how does that work? I'm just interested in the interaction between psychedelics and the brain, really,
Oh, okay. I mean, like, so there are different types of psychedelics. There's like, like there's like serotonergic psychedelics, like psilocybin and like ecstasy is also one. There's like ketamine, which is an NMDA receptor antagonist. And I guess the specific, again, this is not the research that I'm currently doing. This is research I was like helping out with a few years ago, but it was a study mainly on ketamine, and so there are these receptors in neurons called NMDA receptors, and they're important for like kind of modulating the strength of a synaptic connection between two neurons. And so they're a glutamate agonist. So when this chemical glutamate binds to the NMDA receptor, then it opens, but it also has this magnesium ion plug in it. So it's only when the neuron that the NMDA receptor is on accumulates enough positive charge to repel the magnesium ion plug, and when glutamate is bound to it, which means that a presynaptic neuron is like communicating with that neuron, it's only then that the NMDA receptor is like open, and it lets in like a bunch of calcium ions into the cell, and those calcium ions, they bind to vesicles containing like more receptors for glutamate and more like receptors that would allow more positive charge to come into the cell. So like the NMDA receptor kind of acts as like a coincidence detector between neurons. So like they only open when a presynaptic neuron and a postsynaptic neuron are active at the same time, which means they're communicating with each other. So and then they strengthen the synapse. Although you can also get other effects where they end up like, if they're firing like out of sync, or if you're getting like the postsynaptic neuron is firing like before the presynaptic neuron, that means there's probably not like a good communication between the presynaptic and postsynaptic. So then they end up like modulating the synapse differently, so it like decreases its strength. And so the NMDA receptor is really like important for like modulating connections, strengths of connections between two neurons that are communicating. So ketamine is a NMDA receptor antagonist, so it actually blocks it, but you can actually get this interesting effect. Like I said before, since it's not quite as like cut and dry as like if the NMDA receptor is active, then it'll strengthen. It's only if it's like active in like a specific way, or if so ketamine ends up like helping like modulate those synapses as well, because it affects that receptor. And that's kind of mainly what my like the research I was helping with was.
Okay.
So
like
go ahead.
Go ahead, Diane.
Go ahead. Is it in the point where the connection between in the synapse is improved that the hallucinations take place, or is that in the stage where significant elements are blocked?
So it's a dissociative agent. Ketamine is like specifically like a dissociative agent. Actually, it's not even clear like if ketamine should be classified as a psychedelic or not. I'm not entirely sure, but anyway, but specifically what it does, like it decouples like what the dissociative agent like ketamine or PCP would do is like decouple activity in different like regions of this part of your brain called the cortex and the thalamus, while it would couple together other ways, other regions in like atypical ways. So like,
gotcha. Okay.
So like dissociation happens when you get like coupling where you're not supposed to get coupling, and decoupling where you're not supposed to get decoupling between different brain regions. And so affecting the NMDA receptor would like affect this.
Interesting. Right. So, okay. So yeah, ketamine is not something I have had personal experience with, or PCP. Right. So I cannot like, come at it from a personal relationship,
Me neither.
like experience
Nope.
perspective, right? But famously, PCP is supposed to, like, people on PCP often don't feel a lot of pain, right? This is one of the dissociative effects. For example, it decouples some of the pain receptors, for example, in the brain, perhaps.
Yeah, it's kind of like the thalamus is kind of like this like gate through which all sensory information passes, and then it goes to cortex. So like if you disrupt the relationship between thalamus and cortex, then yeah, stuff like sensation gets affected, and stuff like, motor commands get like being sent properly get disrupted, and things like that.
Fair enough. Okay, I'm far more familiar. Again, I don't have any experience with ecstasy, right? But I am familiar with a lot of people who have.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Yeah, we're going to keep saying allegedly. Okay. Does it work in like, okay, but that's a serotonin based one, you said.
Yeah. So that's different. So that's like MDMA acts on like serotonin receptors, and so does psilocybin. They act on serotonin. So psilocybin does have like synaptogenesis, like inducing properties. So like you form more synapses. And also something that's really interesting is that, with psilocybin, so there's this really interesting area of like theoretical neuroscience that was trying to figure out like the kind of like the structure of visual cortex, or try to see if you could get some sort of structure of visual cortex out of like the the patterns and things that people see when they hallucinate. So in the 1970s, this famous theoretical neuroscientist Jack Cowan did a lot of research on this, where he had this theory that the organization of visual cortex is kind of like a representation of that is what you see in like patterns and things like that from psilocybin induced hallucinations, because it causes a lot of noisy activity. So like a lot of neurons and visual cortex are all firing at once. So you get a lot of like noise in the And so like the stuff that appears are kind of like representations of how neurons are organized in general there, because all of them are firing at once. So it's kind of interesting.
That's fascinating, actually. Huh.
Is LSD similar to that?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Fair.
Totally fair.
Fair answer. Yep.
Totally fair. Yeah.
There's been a lot of research on the use of hallucinogens, psilocybin in particular, right,
Yeah.
for treating things like psychotic disorders and PTSD, right? How would that work? And from a neuroscientific perspective, right? What do you think of that? You know, I'm interested because people will have read a lot of research about this, right? Probably if you've ever looked into, like, I don't know, anybody who's familiar with Philip K. Dick has probably come across this at one point or another, right? So I'm like, you know, I'd like to know a little bit more about it if you have anything to offer on that perspective, and if you don't, that's fine too.
Yeah, so I guess the line of research that the lab that I was working in that was studying this was thinking about was like, you know, doing like mouse experiments where you'd see if like ketamine treatments would help, you know, reduce like stress behaviors or stress related behaviors in mice. And also they were looking at like mice who had like a mutation that would kind of that's related to schizophrenia, and also like mice with a mutation that was related to autism. And that was kind of like the set of mice that they were like seeing if like ketamine treatments would affect them or not. And the reasoning behind that is because it acts on these like synaptic, you know, even like all of these in general, like ketamine
Right.
and psilocybin and you know, all these things, they ultimately act on like synapses between neurons and like strengthening or weakening the synapses. And so especially in schizophrenia, something I think is that there's like a degradation of synapses as well. So something like that
Right.
would be, you know, it's kind of logical to think that maybe that could help treat that. And yeah, so yeah, it's an active area of research.
Yeah, fair enough. And not a lot of conclusive evidence yet. I'm given to understand there have been some promising studies, but not enough to develop a whole, yeah, this is good or whatever, right? So, yeah. And also, do you think it might have any bearing on research to treat dementia? Right? Because I'm given to understand that, you know, part of the problems that occur in dementia is some of the breakdown of these synapses. Like, does it help form new synaptic pathways? Like, is anybody researching that? I don't know. Right? Like, I heard something about that vaguely, and, you know, I try to keep up on current science news. Do you know if anybody's doing more detailed studies on that, or?
I mean, I think they are, yeah. And I think, you know, Alzheimer's too is like a lot of like, you know, death of neurons and synapses because of like accumulation of amyloid and tau tangles and disruptions to the specific proteins there. So like, I think it's an active area of research, though. Again, this is not what I'm researching right now.
Yeah,
so,
fair.
yeah.
Right? No, I totally understand this is not exactly your field. It's adjacent, right? And you know, I was just curious what you might have heard in that area, just because I know that that's something that's, well, it's okay. So it's interesting me right now, and I know it's interesting other people. So I'm like, okay, right? Like what, you know, what's going on there, right? And if you had any insight to offer, which is fair, right? Like totally cool that it's not your field, right? And your field is more specific. So you're like, you know, you've been very careful even in the beginning to go, yeah, this, I cannot speak to this as an expert because I am not an expert, and I don't want to be perceived as saying something that I don't have the qualifications to know, which I think is really like a hallmark of somebody who is a serious scientist who's done a lot of work.
Wait.
No.
Wait. You're telling me that scientists don't know everything about science?
That's right. That's
I'm very
right.
confused because all of the shows that I've ever watched The scientist knows everything. They
Right?
know about neuroscience. They know about biology. They know about chemistry. They know about physics. I'm very confused right now, Diane. This is just talk
A
about
good
changing
point about
realities.
propaganda,
I just
which
don't know
we
what's
were
happening right
discussing
now.
at the beginning of our yeah. Oh, they're
X-Files just
scientists. They
failed
know.
me.
Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Where's Gillian Anderson? I'm just playing around.
Yeah.
No, I get it. No, it's that's totally understandable. Totally understandable. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I get your hesitance in talking towards that, though. Though I will say you definitely know more about that than probably any of us, and
Yes.
probably anybody who listens to the podcast. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Yeah, I remember also at the beginning of the conversation, and I said I was going to ask you more about it, and feel free to shut me down, Alan. But okay, you were talking about. I don't remember the term now. I should
Ah.
remember the term. It had to do something about the neuroscience of ADHD. We were talking about.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, so again, this is just from stuff I've like learned in classes because this is not what I'm researching specifically for ADHD, but I mean, I did take like a neuro of disease class, so this is like just from what I remember from that, but basically, I mean, wait, should I explain like how do you all know like how neurons like communicate, like what an action potential is and
Not
what
really.
I do sort of. I have some real basics, but fill us in.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So I see again, this is the thing. I need to like learn how to like communicate things like even in my stories and stuff. I need to learn how to communicate things. Basically, your brain is made up of like cells called neurons, and the way that neurons communicate is through these things called synapses. And a synapse is like a small gap between a sending neuron and a receiving neuron. And the sending neuron releases chemicals to the receiving neuron. These chemicals are called neurotransmitters, and this causes the receiving neuron to create like an electrical signal called an action potential. And the electrical signal allows it to release its own chemicals to other neurons, and this causes like a chain reaction, which is the communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the chemicals that are important for understanding ADHD, neurotransmitters, two of them are dopamine and norepinephrine.
Mm-hmm.
And so dopamine is a chemical that helps with sustained focus and kind of being able to switch between different tasks because it's really active in the regions of the brain that produce the dopamine, the dopaminergic neurons and stuff like that, and the regions that receive it are, people have done behavioral studies to like show that it's important for that. And norepinephrine is one that helps with like alertness and attention. And so both of these are like called catecholamines. They're in the same group of chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, but if the chemical in general, and there are many more neurotransmitters than just these, and these are specifically called neuromodulators, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, acetylcholine. They're called neuromodulators because the receptors that they bind to, they're not exactly like ion channel receptors. They're kind of different. But basically, if the chemical stays in the synapse, so the sending neuron, the presynaptic neuron releases the chemical. And if it stays in the synapse for too long, then the ability of the receiving neuron to kind of send its electrical signal is disrupted. So if the dopamine stays in the synapse too long, then that's not good. So the chemicals are either taken back into the sending neuron through proteins called transporters, or they're broken down in the synapse itself with enzymes. Another thing is if the chemicals don't stay in the synapse long enough, or if not enough is being like released or received, then the receiving neuron won't be able to send its signal either. And if this happens with norepinephrine or dopamine, it can cause ADHD. And so like with norepinephrine and dopamine, they can be taken back into the sending cell with like transporter proteins. Or because they're in the same group of chemicals called catecholamines, this enzyme called COMT can break both of them down. And so ADHD can be caused if there's either too much COMT breaking down the norepinephrine and dopamine in the synapse, or if there's like not enough of the dopamine or norepinephrine being released. And also it can be caused if there are like not enough receptors for dopamine or norepinephrine in the receiving neurons, in the postsynaptic neurons. And so like one of the ways that dopamine is released is through like movement. So if not enough dopamine is like staying in the synapse or activating receptors, then a way to cause more dopamine is to kind of move really frequently to counteract the sparsity in the synapse. And so some medications will aim to keep dopamine in the synapse longer so the person doesn't need to like move excessively anymore to get the dopamine to a healthy level. So like medications like Concerta or Ritalin are dopamine transporter blockers, and they block the transporter proteins from being able to function. So they prevent the sending cells from sucking the dopamine out of the synapse, and it'll stay like in the synapse longer. And yeah, or like same with norepinephrine is like it's a norepinephrine. Strattera's or atomoxetine is like a norepinephrine transporter blocker, and so you'd have like attention and stuff like that. So these are kind of like why people treat it in these ways. So yeah, I don't know. That went way too long, I think. But
Not at all. No, I don't know about Alan, but I was like, oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. And
Yeah.
also that tells
Same.
me that there are basically two different forms of ADHD, right?
there are many different forms, but like that's why ADHD meds are so hard to like get the right one, because like you don't necessarily know what is causing the ADHD.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Like what mechanism of these kind of options is causing it.
And to me, it also explained the neuroscience of how there can be, distracted attention and hyperfocus, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, that's fascinating. That's really, really interesting. I'm like, oh, okay. So, and this is the way my brain works, right? I start here. I'm listening to your description of how the various neurotransmitters work, why they don't work, right?
Mhm.
And I'm going, oh, okay. So if I need to concentrate more, that's why getting up and going for a walk helps. Oh, okay. If I need to divert from a
Oh,
hyper
nice.
focus,
Yeah.
that's why changing the scenery helps. Aha! And my brain is now coming up with better strategies.
Mhm.
That's great. Thank you. That was really helpful to me. I hope it was as helpful to our listeners. I hope it all makes it in the edit.
I mean, I don't know.
I'll try. We are starting to run long. We need to get Arula out of here because she has important science things to do, I'm sure. She has to learn physics by next week, and then chemistry the week after that, so that she could be a TV scientist.
There you go.
So, and then she can be in the new version of X-Files. I do want to switch topics just a little bit related, and I know that you're also not an expert in this, but I definitely think that there's crossover here, especially the way people talk about it. AI has been the hot topic for the last, gosh, I don't even know, I feel like 2 years now, maybe. And, people are saying it's going to be as good as humans soon and everyone's going to lose their job, blah, 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 right? My first question to you, Arula, is do we even understand, I don't know, 75% of how the brain works?
I feel like I don't even know if we know. I like, what does 75% mean? I don't.
Yeah, right?
It's
Right?
Yeah, no. There's so much we don't know. It's gonna take I don't know. We're centuries and centuries away from having
Yes.
a solid understanding of the brain, is my current opinion. I mean, we know a lot, we know a lot and we've done a lot, again, the ADHD stuff, there's still a lot we don't know about ADHD, but we've learned enough to, come up with these medications that target mechanisms that help people, and I don't know. So
Yeah.
it's a tricky question to answer because it depends on the framing of the question. It's kind of like asking, do we know how the universe works? We have the theory of general relativity. We have, we know how, we don't know if there's alien life on some planet somewhere. We don't know if it's a complicated question, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think part of my point here being that AI is being simplified into this thing, right? That's actually not so simple, right? And if we don't even know how much we don't know about the brain, how is it that any tech bro thinks that we're going to replicate a brain inside of a computer using microchips.
Oh yeah, no, that's yeah,
You
I
know,
don't. Yeah, it's crazy that or sort like it's really it's not a good way. Like it's so far off from what is
right?
actually going to be possible with AI. Yeah.
Exactly. And really, I don't expect you to go any further with it than that. But that has always been my view on this whole thing from the very beginning. Gosh, a while back, God, I don't know, last year maybe, Diane, we had Clyde Boyer on. Do you remember him?
I do.
And we were talking about self-driving cars and why self-driving cars are such a problem. And it really comes down to like almost like a Buddhist theory, really. But for a self-driving car to drive, it has to realize what a railing is, with the not the railing, but the thing on the side of the road. It has to realize what a person is. It has to understand what a car is. It has to understand the speed laws. It has to understand when to stop and when to go. Oh, hey, there's the trolley problem. That's a whole thing, right? It has to understand all this stuff, but then one thing connects to the next thing, connects to the next thing, connects to the next thing. And it's so complicated that they can't really get the self-driving cars to work that well. I mean, they will work well in some instances, right? But they generally are very controlled instances, right?
I will have to say that I spent a lot of time on my driving trip, right? I have a, fairly recent model hybrid,
Hmm.
and it has drive assist, right? Which is, it will keep the car roughly between the lines, right? It will stop automatically, reactive braking when the sensors pick up an obstacle too close in front of it, right? It made it a lot easier to drive across the country because I wasn't constantly correcting for every little step. So I wasn't mentally exhausted after 3 hours, you know?
Right.
But that's its limit, guys, right? I'm telling you right now, do not think that this is autopilot. For one thing, if the turn was too sharp, right? And all of a sudden the big ass truck that's in front of us is out of the way for a second, and it's slowed because it's slowing for the truck that's climbing the hill, it'll speed up.
Yeah.
Right? Because it doesn't perceive the obstacle there anymore. And if you're not paying attention, you're going to ram your ass right into the back of a semi.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
It gets confused by shoulders that don't have clear line markings. You
Yep.
have to babysit it constantly, right? It does make there's less little decisions that are going on in your brain, like how are you
Yes.
tilting the steering wheel and whatnot, but you have to make sure it's doing that, right? So that's where we are.
I feel like the aspects of the self-driving car that you were talking about, Diane,
Mhm.
are exactly what AI is going to. What I mean, and I'm over here using AI in quotes here. I'm using scare quotes. Okay. Eventually, when people settle down and realize it's not a living machine or whatever, it's exactly what it's going to be. It's going to be a little bit of help doing some things that are annoying. I know I like to use transcription during some of my meetings at work because I sit there and I ask experts about technical subjects a lot of questions, and then I'm not a very good note taker, so it helps me to be able to go back and reread that transcript and then maybe like search the transcript for specific things I'm looking for. You know, and that's run through like an LLM, right? And gosh, if we're calling that AI, I feel kind of like that's a little bit misnamed, folks. But I think Arula's answer is exactly what I expected her to say, and I think that it's just oversold, and it's a little bonkers. People are a little bonkers right now.
Yeah.
I mean, not just about that, of course, but about AI specifically. Like, there's just
Yeah.
no way.
I mean,
There's no way.
I will say, like, there is a lot of, like, I mean, my research is in theoretical neuroscience and, like, developing, like, mathematical theories of how parts of the brain work and, like, how parts of the brain develop and, and a lot of really interesting and useful theoretical neuroscience research, it does use, like neural networks and like statistical learning and stuff like that to model parts of how the brain works. But like, it's like parts of how the brain works. Like, it's not just statistical learning and just like, it's not going to encompass everything about the brain for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I even watched actually this like lecture by like, I think it was like Jeffrey Hinton and Demis Hassabis were giving this like talk, and I watched this lecture, and they were saying how like, oh, we don't need neuroscience anymore. Like, neuroscience has like contributed everything it can to AI, and now it will AI is gonna like branch off or like specifically large language models. I should make that clear, because like AI, like I think AI is getting like a bad reputation as like a term, when in reality it encompasses a lot of different things, and large language models are just like one specific part of it. And so
Yes.
like generative AI specifically is just
Yes.
one subset of
Yes.
that.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
but, okay, they were talking about generative AI and how they wanted to like invest a lot into like scaling it, and they wanted, but then it was kind of contradictory, because they also said like they wanted to hire like neuroscientists to like analyze the AI, but if they're diverging from neuroscience research and they say neuroscience has contributed everything it can and now we're going off into a different direction, then how could they possibly think that neuroscience like analysis techniques would be useful for, but I don't mean that's sorry, that's like a whole different tangent.
Yeah.
But but yeah, so I'm not a fan of like this mentality of like, oh, we're going to, we've created, or we're working towards creating intelligence, when in reality we don't really know how to define intelligence in the first place. We don't know like what goes into it. Like I don't like that for sure.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yep. And this is the last thing I'm going to say about it, and then we need to ask you the final two questions. But I have training in psychometrics, and what that is just like basically measuring intelligence, right? Just to make it very plain and simple, and miss a lot of the technical things in there. But people can't even agree on what that means, really. Like, there's all these different ways. Like, somebody say, I have an IQ of 140. Well, that's nice,
Yeah.
but what does IQ even mean? You know what I mean? That there's all these different circumstances, and there's all these different, measurements and things that go into that. But, like, I've had an IQ test before, and they're like, name as many M words as you can in the next 5 minutes. I forget what the timing was, 2 minutes, something like that, right? Okay, great. I have a high vocabulary. It was not a big deal for me, but that is like one aspect of an aspect, you know what I mean, of intelligence, right? And even if they measured, I can't remember, we were there for 4 hours, so they measured a lot of stuff, right? But even in the 4 hours of measurement, that has to be just a very small piece of what intelligence really is. Because think about, and this goes back to the self-driving car thing, of like, you need to know this and this and this and this and this and this. You need to understand the whole entire context, because, and this goes back to the Buddhist thing, everything is connected, people. Everything is connected. And so unless you understand all of it or have some kind of context for all of it, you can't, these little tiny decisions become more and more vague, and whatever's making these little decisions doesn't even, I want to say it doesn't know why it's making these decisions, which is obvious because this is a machine. It doesn't know anything anyway. But it makes that decision harder, because you need to have that context to understand why that decision is being made, right? And then I'm done. I promise. I swear I'm done.
Truthfully, like if people had like started, okay, I actually don't have anything against like the actual like technology itself, like just the like the actual like how you build a large language model and how it works. I have nothing against that. Like, it's really just the fact that it's being used and implemented like unethically.
Right.
It's like, it's plagiarizing, it's stealing from people, and
Mhm.
also that, it's being, I think, implemented in society in a way that's irresponsible, because, you have people turning to it for like therapy, and you have people turning into it for
Yep.
all these things that it hasn't really been like, there hasn't been any like formal procedure like evaluating its like, capability to do these things, and yet it's being like implemented. That's really what I mainly have an issue with. But like, in terms of actually like how it works, or like, the idea of using a large language model, if it had been created ethically, implemented ethically and stuff like that, I actually
Yes.
don't really have much of a problem with like that specifically. And I think like something I really want to make sure is to like and not have people like develop like a bad association with the word or the term AI, or like if they see AI to like, because there are a lot of useful applications, and even in like theoretical neuroscience and modeling the brain and trying to model parts of the brain and stuff like that, it is really useful. But yeah, it's just the main issues that I really have with AI are like the unethical implementation and the like and the fact that it's driven by these like corporations who want to like, kind of destroy creative sectors and destroy
Yep.
like just it's horrible.
Well, because they think it's going to replace us because they don't have to pay them, right?
It's not.
But the problem is, guys, it's not ready. I'm talking to the business executives out there at the heads of corporations that are trying to do this. Guys, okay, it's not ready. Even if you weren't an asshole for trying to replace people, this is not, it's like I saw a meme, right? And the meme was, I wanted AI to do my dishes and clean my house so I had more time to do creative things, not AI to do my creative things so I had more time to do my dishes and clean my house. Guys,
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
this is what it's capable of doing your dishes and cleaning your house. I like my car. I like this feature of my car. It was helpful, but it required my babysitting. It required my decision making. And the sensors failed because it got bugs on the sensors going over,
Yeah.
and I had to, scrub the car before I could use it again. This is where we're at, guys, right? You would really do a lot better to sell it as the tool it is, rather than try to use it to replace Hollywood writers.
Yes.
You're not ready. It's not ready. It's not going to work. And what you're going to do instead of actually like saving you expenses is you're going to tank your industry, and creatives are going to find another way to make money, right? Where we don't need you.
Yeah.
So,
Arula, we have 3 questions that we ask everybody at the end. 2 of them are promotional questions. One is kind of the crux of the whole podcast. What is giving you hope right now?
Oh, honestly, it's my research in science. If I'm being honest,
awesome.
I mean, it gives me, and I think, even in like what I'm writing right now, it like, there's like it's kind of coming full circle because I feel like I'm writing. Yeah, it's like, I've written the nihilistic stuff. I've written like the wholesome, hopeful stuff. And I've kind of feel like the thing that I'm writing right now is like, it's bringing a lot of, it's mixing everything together. So it's like, I'm really excited to write that, like, I feel like but anyway,
awesome.
the thing that's giving me hope is like the core of the thing I'm writing right now too, which is like this kind of like humanity's, relentless kind of pursuit of trying to understand the nature of reality. We don't know if anything else in the universe really cares or wants to or has the ability to do this, but we're doing this, and it's something that's really unique to humans. And it's really amazing to kind of be a part of that, even if like I'm, my PhD thesis is going to be on like a really niche thing. But it's still like a contribution to that. And I love thinking about it, and I'm really, I don't know. It makes me really happy, and it gives me a lot of hope to try and like, answer just this one part of like something that we don't know about the nature of reality.
That's awesome.
I think it's wonderful that you're working in that, ancient human quest of trying to understand the nature of reality in the world in which we live, in the universe we find ourselves in. And that is, that's what speculative fiction's all about, right?
Yeah. Next time you come on, I'm going to ask you, what is the nature of reality? So just be prepared for that.
Yeah, and she's going to rightfully tell you to sod off is what she's going to do.
Man.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so we've kind of talked about this a little bit. Do you have anything coming out soon that anybody should know about?
Oh gosh, I've been so busy with myself. I am writing something, But so, I mean, okay, I guess like if you're going to read anything, like, Fractal Karma is my most recent novella, and it's nominated for an Ignite Award. So it's a finalist in the novella category there. So that's really cool. I am writing something. I think it's going to end up being a novel, actually.
What?
So that's kind of interesting. And that's probably why it's been taking so much longer too. I'm like, oh, this is not a novella. This is a novel. This is why it's
Wow.
taking like 2 years, not 1 year, I'm like, this is a
Okay.
novel, but it's really that I'll probably finish it next year. I don't think I'll have anything like really to finish writing this year. There's just no time, but I'm like a pretty slow writer, and it's also just because I'm super, super busy. Like I have like research and classes and teaching and stuff. So yeah.
Clearly.
Yeah, you're kind of
Yeah.
working on your PhD, so yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
busy.
You may kind of be a little busy.
Honestly, I'm just very excited you were able to make it here. So
No, this was really great.
Yeah,
This
me
is like
too.
an interesting conversation for sure.
awesome. I love that. I love that. Before you go though, where can people find you on the internet, or where do you want people to find you on the internet? Maybe that's the
Oh,
better question.
my website is my first name dash my last name.com. I like if you want to contact me for like stuff related to like my research, then you'd use my like university email. And if you want to contact me for like writing stuff, I have like an author email, and then I'm on Blue Sky.
Excellent. Excellent. Excellent.
Awesome. Searching your name found your website right away. So I'm sure that Alan will go over the spelling again so that people know where to
Yeah,
find
let
you.
me do that right now before I forget. It's
Cool. Dude.
Arula, Arula, Ratnakar, Ratnakar.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I spelled it right. I'm just happy I pronounced it right, honestly. Pronunciations are where I struggle.
Oh, you totally got it. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It has been a pleasure. A super interesting conversation. I feel smarter now. I think my brain grew during this episode. So
Oh. Okay. Thank you.
Certainly a joy, and we definitely made more neural connections than we did not have at the beginning of this conversation.
Oh yeah. But I feel like there are a lot of things that I'm not like, it's not my area of research. So just like if
Yeah,
you
keep
know,
that in
yeah.
mind, guys. She's not speaking as an expert in those fields when she said, I'm trying to back you up on this one. But awesome, right? You've taught me a lot
Yeah.
today. Thank you very much. This was great.
Thank you.
Okay, and that was our conversation with Arula Ratnakar. Before we continue on, don't forget to share our podcast with your friends on Facebook or Blue Sky or Twitter or whatever it is used these days. You can also go out and rate or review us. That is very helpful. And if you really like what we're doing, you may also go out and support us on patreon.com/ifthisgoeson. We actually have a new Patreon person very recently. So thank you so much. And, if you don't want to do the regular monthly thing, go on Ko-fi, Kofi. So, yeah, you can donate some money to us there if you would like. One time only type of situation. Diane?
Hi, yes. Opinions, thoughts. What a delightful,
Mm-hmm.
incredibly bright person. She was fun. I kept thinking we were making her nervous because she kept going, that's not my field,
Mm-hmm.
but I love these kind of conversations with intelligent people, especially intelligent people who know so much more in a particular area than I do, right? Who can, discuss teach me something about how things work, or, speculate where things might go from here. And I feel I wasn't sure how I was going to approach this interview
Mm-hmm.
because I had only read the one story
Mm-hmm.
and I wasn't familiar with her. And I'm like, I am not a math person.
Oh, yeah.
Right. But damn, I had such a good time. This was really cool. I'm sorry in advance if this episode turns out to be one of our longer ones and it's not.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be, I don't think there's any way that it can be dealt with otherwise. right?
Yeah.
But I hope you'll agree that it was worth it, because it was certainly worth it to me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, she was super fun to talk to. You were talking about how she kept saying, well, I'm not an expert in that. I actually kind of thought that was a little bit funny when at the end I was like, I think my brain grew during this. I could just hear her thinking, that's not actually how that works, Alan.
Yeah.
I
No,
was
more
joking,
like
of course.
new neural connections. That is
Right,
more
right.
how it works, you know?
Yep. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but even that's an oversimplification, I have since learned. But hey, there you go.
I mean, but that's kind of the way, everything we talk about to a certain degree is an oversimplification, right? And
Yes.
it's about simplifying it enough that you can talk about it without sounding like an academic paper, but also getting specific enough where what you're saying has like specific meaning, right? Meaning in the context of our discussion, right? And
Yeah, and that's how speculative fiction works, I think, right?
yeah.
We have to understand the concepts well enough to work with them and make it make sense, but at the same time, we can't make it so beyond the pale of the regular person that they can't follow. Yeah.
Well, that's actually one of the things I like about her work, and I don't generally like hard science fiction. I generally stay away from it.
Right.
Because, I feel like sometimes I need to have like an engineering degree to understand what the hell they're talking about. And I'm not trying to go get another degree just to read a novel. There's plenty of other ones I don't need a degree to read. I actually do have a degree in literature, so I'm good. I'm not trying to, I don't want to have 2 to 3 degrees to read a book, right? But her work is so interesting in the way that it deals with, like we said before, like reality and what would happen if this is going on, or even just the stuff that's like the quote unquote hard science part of her work is just very different than anything else I've ever read.
Right. Yeah, I really like her style, and I actually like hard science fiction. We've had that conversation. I feel that I can follow well enough to at least understand the plot usually, right? So I'm good with that. I read a lot about a lot of different things.
Mhm.
And, even though my education doesn't reflect it, a lot of it is academic, right? But but yeah, you don't need that
Yeah.
when you're approaching her work. If that, if fractal karma is any indication, and yeah, I like it. I like it. It humanizes the concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know exactly what you mean. I have a tendency to get bored with engineering stuff. Like
Hey, not me.
I know I can understand it because that's literally my job, is to understand complicated stuff and then communicate it in a simple way.
Yeah, but you do that for your work, so you don't want to do it in your reading.
Right.
I on the other hand, I'm like, ooh, mind food. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like I don't, I just am like, it's like Red Mars. I love Red Mars, the book.
Uh-huh.
There is a section in there where it goes into like a biochemistry. And I didn't know this until afterwards, but it's apparently out of date biochemistry. But nonetheless, I was reading it and I was just like, oh my God, like, I just don't care. Like, I like just started skipping pages of like, don't care, don't care, don't care. Ah, story has started again. Okay. I really don't give a shit about the rest of this. Love the novel, did not care about those 5 pages.
Fair. That's a perfectly valid reason. That's a perfectly valid way to read science fiction.
I mean, but with hers, I mean, nature of reality is an interest of mine. And has something about the way that she goes about doing it. Yeah. But anyway, what are you reading right now? Speaking of reading.
But you know what I'm reading right now actually is a collection, the complete collection of Sherlock Holmes. That is what I'm reading right now.
I have read that. I've read that whole thing. Yes.
I've read, it's been a lot of years since I read Sherlock Holmes, and I did not in any way read the whole collection.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But this is one of those classic hardcover omnibus books that I happened to encounter at Jamie's mother's home when we went out there. And it's mine and I'm reading it.
Yeah.
And so Sherlock Holmes is cool. I've speaking of our neurodiversity conversation, right? I understand that in the most recent, now I haven't seen the most recent show, and people tell me I still have to see it, but in the most recent adaptation, I'm told that Holmes is portrayed as a, functional psychopath. I could see it. right? But I actually think from rereading it from my current perspective that you could make an argument that Holmes is ADHD,
Oh yeah,
right?
totally.
He clearly has, the autistic special interest focus in criminal behavior and whatnot. And he has an ADHD way of doing things and approaching things. And I gotta say, from my perspective, I see why I've always loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because this man sort of thinks like me. And I like that he does because I'm like, you know, I sometimes when he doesn't like because they do the gradual like they reveal all the information at the end of the story,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you don't have all the information. I haven't always figured it out by halfway through. But when I have all that information, I've usually figured out the trend. I'm like, oh no, that guy's the guilty guy, right? And so on. So yeah, and it's fun to challenge myself to see if I can do that. Murder mysteries have always been a guilty pleasure of mine. What are you reading?
Yeah, not Sherlock Holmes. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna have to start splitting this into comic books and I don't know, other at this point. So let's see. I'm actually reading a lot of nonfiction at the moment. I'm reading Four Lost Cities, A Secret History of the Urban Age by Anna Lee Newitz. Not very far into that one, but it's basically split up into 4 sections, and she talks about these 4 lost cities and kind of like what it tells us about how people live in cities now. Kind of got into it for the archaeological side of things, that's one of my, I don't know if I'd call it a special interest, but definitely like maybe like a secondary or tertiary interest. When you have as many interests as people like us do, you can easily get into tertiary interests.
Yes.
I'm also reading The Last American Road Trip, a memoir by Sarah Kendzior. I've never heard her name pronounced. And it's kind of like, okay, she is a journalist who frequently writes about American politics. She's written a lot of books about Trump and corruption in the United States, but this book in particular is more about like it's kind of like her reflecting on her family life, but also like the descent of the United States into fascism, like on a road trip with her family, basically.
Mm.
So like she talks about different places she goes and why she goes there and the things that make her what she thinks about when she's there and kind of reflects on current politics and stuff in there. It's a very interesting. I've never quite read anything like it. It's very interesting. She's super smart. Sometimes it's a little bit depressing, so I have to give it a break, but I have enjoyed it. In fiction land, I'm reading Unseen Gods by Justin Hawley. I just finished it actually, like literally right before this podcast, I finished it. It's just like you know, I hesitate to say run of the mill, but yeah, your run of the mill horror novel. You know, these people go out to a cabin that they think is haunted or whatever. And yeah, it's haunted and bad things happen and a lot of people die in very bloody ways, that sort of thing.
Fair enough.
This is the time of year where I start reading scary stuff. So it's like, okay, this is going to be the one that kicks off my year. So.
And you're not the only one, I'm sure. So, and sometimes a familiar format is enjoyable. So there you go.
Exactly. And then comic side of things, I have been reading Absolute Wonder Woman, which has been an absolute pleasure. Fantastic comic book. Freaking blowing my mind. I may be in the top 5 comics I've ever read, maybe top 3. It's that good.
Tell me more.
Okay, so I don't completely understand it because you know how convoluted comic book worlds get.
Yes.
But something happened, and I'm trying to read through the series now. I got the DC comic app, so I can go back and like literally read everything.
Ooh.
So like something happened where Darkseid came and like split the universe in half. And so the universe, like, I don't want to say split it, but like diverged halves of the universe, right? And one half of the universe,
Right.
like, reflects like the spirit of Superman, of like goodness and that kind of stuff. And that's like the regular DC universe. And the other one is like a grittier universe, but it's not like, and I can only speak for Wonder Woman because I haven't read any of the other Absolute. Oh, no, that's not true. I did read Absolute Martian Manhunter, which is also fantastic. But it's not like, Batman's a psychopathic murderer, gritty. like some of the movies were. You know what I mean?
Right.
Again, I can only speak for Martian Manhunter, and I can only speak for Wonder Woman at this point. But like Wonder Woman is still Wonder Woman, but there's no Amazons anymore, right? That part of her life is over. Just didn't exist basically, and she was
Right.
brought up in a different way. But she's still Wonder Woman. She's still like, I'm gonna save everybody, and I'm a fantastic person who does all these awesome things. So it's like the character's not gritty, like the character's the same, but the world is grittier. I think that's what's kind of going on there. Martian Manhunter.
That's interesting.
Yes. And let me tell you, the art is fucking phenomenal. Oh my God. Even
Wow.
just
Okay.
the framing.
The F word out of your mouth tells me everything I need to know right there.
Just the framing of the panels is like, wow, this is awesome.
I clearly have to look this up. This is great.
Absolute Martian Manhunter. The art is just like, it's utterly psychedelic. I mean, it's just completely like,
Sweet.
It's so different than any comic I've ever read. Now, I am not a comic expert by any means, but over the years I've read a bit,
Right?
I'm familiar.
You and I both kind of casual comic nerds. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I highly recommend everyone go and check those out. I'm also reading through the entirety of Swamp Thing. I finished the 70s run, which I was actually fairly impressed with. Like, it was as cheesy as I expected it to be because it was written in the 70s. But it was actually like,
I mean, to me, that's classic era Swamp Thing. So yeah.
I was extremely surprised by the progressive politics in it. Very anti-racist, very anti-treating people poorly. You know what I mean? Just like othering people, I guess. Anti-othering people.
Right.
I mean, that was, I would say, was really the whole theme for the whole 70s run. And, it's the ending of it was kind of shitty, but, badly written. But I'm now at the very beginning of the 80s and 90s Swamp Thing, like the really huge run, the one that had Alan Moore in it. I'm not to Alan Moore yet, but I'm prior Alan Moore, but
right.
Pretty good. I mean, I feel like they just basically picked up from the 70s and kind of slapped it down and kept going. But I know, obviously, that once Alan Moore comes in, it completely changes, and that's where Swamp Thing really becomes like fantastic. So, at least that's the
right.
that's the common.
That's the general common theme, common belief, anyway. Yep.
Yeah. So I haven't got there yet, but I am enjoying it, and is definitely continued to keep its progressive slant on things, which I've enjoyed. And yeah, that's it. I'm reading a lot right now. My Nintendo Switch broke, so
this explains a lot.
Yeah, I'm reading like triple.
I was like, holy crap, you've got a lot of stuff on your reading plate right now. Well, that would be the explanation why.
Yeah. No video games, so I read more now. Someday when my video games are fixed, I will read less, probably.
That's fair. Pretty cool. And I will be spending November doing what I usually do, which is Game of Tomes. So you can find me there if that's what if you're looking to find me. If it's not related to the event, I will probably deal with you in December. Because I am, it's our big event, and there's a lot going on this year, right? There are 2 Night Monarchs, for example, 2 people playing the bad guy, and it's going to be like a comic book kind of theme. So it's like anime almost. It basically, a lot of it is going to be a riff off of Pokemon. So I am really looking forward to it. It should be a lot of fun. So that's what I'll be doing. Thought I'd mention that so that people knew what I was up to. Thanks for inviting me to join you for this one, Alan. I had a good time.
Absolutely. And I actually remembered this year. How many years have you been doing Game of Tomes? 3 or 4?
A little bit
at this point.
5.
5?
Yeah, we just celebrated our 5th anniversary. Yeah.
Okay. And I finally remembered. This is the first year I remembered. It only takes me 5 years to learn things, Diane. Only 5 years.
You know what?
I'm a smart kid.
You know what? ADHD. It's a thing. I get it. It's cool. But thank you for remembering. This is cool.
All right. So I think we're gonna call it here. Thanks everybody for listening and supporting us. As always, we really, really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you for long listing us for a Hugo, guys. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I'm glad to be able to tell my uncle, who is an old school science fiction fan, that he's always impressed to be like, wow, that's so awesome. And so that makes me excited. So thank you, everybody. That's fantastic. And so we are bringing you hope one episode at a time. If This Goes On, Don't Panic is edited by and produced by Alan Bailey. Our theme music is by Father Flamethrower. Additional music is by Christopher Snydrowski. And outro music by Sable Aradia. Intro by Dave Robinson. A special thanks to our guest, Arula Ratnakar. Thanks for supporting us, and we'll see you again soon.